So thank you all very much for coming. We love chatting to prospective students. So I'm Lizzie and I'm the Schools Liaison Officer at Trinity. And so my job is to basically chat to prospective students and schools and try and demystify Cambridge and Trinity and make you see that it's a really lovely place to come and study if you'd like to study with us. I also went to Cambridge. So I didn't go to Trinity, but I went to a different college and then I moved over to Trinity. So I have a good experience of a wide range of colleges, but I can say that Trinity is really growing on me. So I might share the favourite space in my heart with the college I went to, Newnham. But no, Trinity is a really, really lovely place. And I'm really lucky that I get to do a lot of outreach work because Trinity is really committed to opening itself up to anybody who wants to come and study here and breaking down any barriers that might prevent anyone, regardless of like their background or, you know, if they've been to university before. Trinity is really committed to letting everyone in and everyone study if they want to. So today I'm joined by Glen Rangwala, who is our admissions tutor. And yeah, he's going to chat a little bit about sort of like very loosely the process. But as I said, whilst he's talking, pop questions in the Q&A and then we'll go into it. So over to you, Glen.
So hello, everyone. It's really nice to see a good turnout today for our second day of open days this September. I'm Glen Rangwala. I'm by day I teach politics and Middle Eastern studies at the university level. So I teach students from all colleges who are interested in Middle Eastern studies. But at the college at Trinity, I'm the admissions tutor, one of the 3 admissions tutors at this college. So I'm helping devise the overall process for people who are interested in applying, overseeing the outreach work. And then if you apply, I will be one of the 3 people who will get first look at your application and see why you think you should be here coming to this university and this college in particular. So this session is, well, firstly, it's in September, less than a month before the deadline for your applications for entry in 2022. So we are sort of assuming that many of you already have a fairly good sense of the subject you want to study at university. You should be at that stage by now, I hope, if you're thinking of starting here in 2022. And have already had some thoughts about, about the sorts of interests that you would like to pursue while you're here in Cambridge. So I'm not going to go over the basics because I'm assuming that most of that will be known to you. And in any case, it's all on the website in great detail. So I'm not going to go over the basic application process with you. However, I guess a lot of you will be here because firstly, you're thinking about which college to apply to, whether Trinity or another college best appeals to you. And so we'll talk a bit about that. And then secondly, a lot of you are thinking about how do I strengthen my application? I've got the basic idea of what I want to do. I've got a good academic record. I've got lots of motivation. How do I express that in my application? And how will it actually come over at interview? So we're going to talk a bit about that as well. So thank you very much everybody who's sending in questions. You're very welcome to keep on submitting them during this session, but we've got a few general questions which were submitted in advance, which actually provide a very helpful way in to the topics that I expressed earlier. And so we're just going to sort of dive into that. However, if you've got questions that are more individual, that are more about your own particular circumstances, and that won't necessarily speak to everybody or even anybody else here, you are very welcome to email us with that question. And so emailing us on admissions@trin.cam.ac.uk, which Lizzie is now going to put into the chat bar, is the one to use if you've got individual questions you'd like to throw at us. And we will respond to that. It might take us a day or 2 to get to responding, but we will respond. It's much better to send us the question by email rather than to telephone us, because often we do need to consult someone in the subject, for example, or someone with specialist knowledge of a particular sort of, say, for example, non-UK educational system in order to give you an answer to your question. So it's better to email us so that we can consult people if necessary in responding to your question. Okay, so just the question about college firstly. So a lot of people have asked questions about why Trinity, what does Trinity have particularly to offer students. And the first thing just to make clear is that all colleges are largely the same in terms of the teaching that they do. As a student, you go to the lectures that are put on by the university as a whole, which are available to students from all colleges. the course that you take, the examinations that you take at the end of the year are not specific to an individual college. They're done at the level of the overall university. And so, you know, the courses that you take are not determined by the college. However, what we do at Trinity, of course, is have a system of directors of studies and tutors, which we think is very much appeals to those students with strong motivations to study the subjects. All our directors of studies are very motivated people. They really like it when people share the interests in the subject that they teach. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm in the college for people who are intellectually motivated, who are ambitious, who are intellectually, you know, looking to develop an understanding of these topics. And equally, we've got a very good welfare team. It's been one of the things that's really developed in the college over the past 5 or so years. We've got a good range of people in this college who will help keep you on track, if I could put it that way, who are there to advise, who are there to help. And hopefully students won't need that much sort of help on the social side, but it's really useful to have people who, if there are problems, you can speak to in the college. And so our tutors everybody has a personal tutor. And then on top of that, there's a whole system of advisors, health advisors and mental health advisors, counsellors, a whole network of people who we can draw upon for specialist difficulties that you may encounter during your time in college. So we've got a very robust and well-organised welfare team also in the college. On top of that, Trinity, being a large college, has a very diverse and motivated student body. We've got just over 1,000 students here in the college, about 730 undergraduates, about 300 graduates. And so it's a fairly good number of people. And the one really nice thing about Trinity is the range of people you meet. You meet people from all over the world with all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of interests. And I just think that's a really nice environment in which to be based as a student. So there's that whole side of always meeting new people with new things to say to you, things that you haven't encountered before as part of your daily life. And I really like that aspect of it. We're a very diverse college. We've got students from all around the world. We've got students currently from 85 different countries around the world who are in this college at the moment, or will be in this college when term starts in 2 weeks' time. It's a very diverse place. And there's students from a whole variety of backgrounds, school types, educational backgrounds as well within that. On top of that, we've got lovely grounds. So if you like going for a wander in green space, then Trinity is a college that might well appeal to you. It's a college with lots of gardens, lots of places to sit on a warm evening by the river. The college bridges both sides of the Central River in Cambridge. And yeah, lots of things going on all the time in the college. So all those are reasons you might want to bear in mind when thinking about Trinity or another college when it comes to making that choice. That said, it is very much a secondary choice. Your first choice is about the course that you're taking. And please do have that as your primary, only when you've sort of thought about that in detail, when you've thought about whether this is the course that's right for you, whether Cambridge is the right place to do the course that you're most interested in. When you've done that, only then sort of think about colleges. The most important thing is making sure that you're on an educational program that's suitable for you. And so I think that's all I've basically got to say on that. Lizzie, do you want to add anything about the college in that respect?
I think this ties in quite well to a question that someone had where they said that there's an image of Trinity as being not very friendly and has bad accommodation and isn't very inclusive of people. And I think that's a big misconception about Trinity. I think perhaps because the college is very steeped in grandeur and it's got all of these old scholars, and you think that, oh, it's such like an elite place, it must be a very elitist place, but that's really, really not the case. So obviously all Cambridge colleges have work to do to make them an inclusive place. But I think Trinity is genuinely a really friendly, lovely place because it's got so many students from so many different backgrounds, and that almost doesn't really matter because everyone's here because they love their subject. And Trinity is genuinely one of those places where you could sit down in the college bar or coffee shop or the hall and you could just strike up a conversation with someone and they'll just chat to you very happily. So yeah, Trinity is a really friendly place, so I wouldn't let any of the misconceptions sort of put you off. Yeah.
There's been a few questions about bursaries, and I might just sort of talk a bit about finance because it is an important thing to be thinking about when you're applying to university. So all Cambridge students, whatever college you're at, if you're a UK student from a household that has an income of less than £62,000, gets what's called the Cambridge bursary. You're on the Cambridge bursary scheme. And that's a gift. It's not a loan. You get a gift of money from the university, whichever college you're at. And we standardize that across all colleges. So whatever college you're at, you get the same bursary through the Cambridge bursary scheme if you're on a household income of less than £62,000. And it's a tapered bursary. So if you're from a low income household, then you get a higher bursary, and it sort of tapers down, still substantial. Whatever income you're at, up to £62,000. So all UK students on a household income of less than 62k get a Cambridge bursary. That's the same across all colleges. In addition to that, Trinity has bursaries for overseas students, and one of the reasons why, as I mentioned earlier, that we have a very diverse international intake is that we do get applications from students from households that couldn't afford to pay the fees for university from overseas, who know that we offer up to 13 overseas bursaries per year to incoming students, so 13 per year. And they're bursaries that span your time in Cambridge. So if you're on a 4-year degree programme, it'll be a 4-year bursary. The only condition to continue with the bursary is that you do well and you try hard at university. So the bursary is conditional upon getting a decent exam results and on having a positive report from your director of studies. Those bursaries can be full bursaries. They're only full bursaries if you are from a low income household. So the bursary level is tapered to the income about your finances. We only do that after you get your offer. So there's no point telling us about your ambition for getting a Cambridge bursary when you're applying in the first place. That's irrelevant to the decisions that we make about whether to invite you to interview and whether to offer you a place. If you get an offer and you're an overseas student, you will get information in January after you get your offer, asking you if you wish to apply for a Trinity bursary, and if so, to give us these sorts of information. So that's a process that goes on after the application round is for that part of the application round is concluded. If you're a UK student, you get the bursary automatically as long as you apply through the student loan company for a student loan. You don't actually need to take out a student loan, but you need to submit the information into that system, and then you automatically get the Cambridge bursary, as long as you don't tick the box saying you do not want this information to be disclosed to your university. As long as we can see the information, as long as you give us permission to see that information on the Cambridge bursaries, on the bursary scheme, then we will give you automatically the bursary when you start at university. You'll get a lot more information about that if you get your offer. We'll send you information aplenty at that point. This is just to say, at this stage, at the application stage, be aware that these are bursaries available for you, but you don't need to actually start planning out at this stage what you need to do in order to get the bursary, because you'll get that information once you get your offer from the college.
We've got a good question about interviews. Oh, sorry.
Should we talk about a bit more about the college sort of things first?
Yes.
And then let's go on to the interviews for the second half of this, because I thought we'd do this sort of, yeah. So we've got a few questions about state school, private schools. We make judgments about potential of this college. That's the process of making our assessment. And so one thing that, in some ways I'm spanning it over onto what makes a good application, but one thing that we do very much like to know is sort of is what your school background is, and to make an assessment from there about whether you're likely to be one of the top students in your class at school. If you come from a school which has a very high academic achievement and you've got decent marks but not top marks from that school, well, then you're probably around the middle of your year. If you're at an independent school or a school that has high results and you're getting very high results, then of course we take that seriously. But we do like to have a sense of roughly where you are in your academic year. And that's something that schools can helpfully tell us. So, you know, your schools will be often giving you advice about how to write your application. You could also give them some advice about how to write their references. And one thing that we do very much encourage students to do, schools to do, school teachers to do when they write references as part of your application, is give us information about your standing within your academic year. So if, for example, you took school tests at the end of year 12, and you came third in your group of 50 students taking that subject in your school, then for that information to be in the reference, it's really helpful for us to know. It's really helpful for us to be able to say, yes, this is somebody who's in the top 10% of their year. This is someone who's in the subjects that they're most interested in, is achieving highly at that school. And that's often more useful than knowing, you know, whether you've got a 7 or an 8 in your GCSEs. So that's the sort of information that you may just want to find a way to convey back to your school as information that's useful for selective universities like Cambridge, like Trinity, in putting into a reference. Schools often tell us things like, you know, tries hard and is active in class. And of course, you're active in class, you're thinking of applying to Cambridge, or in this open day, you've taken the initiative to join this open day, you must be motivated. What we want is information on you know, on how you're doing at school academically in a relative sense. So just to convey that information back can increase our ability to make a serious assessment of your application.
Should I just whip through some of the sort of
go for it, Lizzie. Yeah.
Casual questions. So there's a question about other places to get food within the college, or do you eat elsewhere in the city? So it's really your choice. We have a hall that serves 3 meals a day, and that's very casual. They do very good food, very good brunch on weekends, and you can just turn up, eat with your friends. It's very casual. We also do formal dinners about once a week, and that's where you properly dress up, wear your Harry Potter style robe, and have a nice 3-course meal with your friends. But it's completely your choice as to whether you want to eat in hall all the time, or you want to self-cater, or you want to go out to eat. But it's just really nice to have that option. So if you're, you know, busy, you can go to the hall.
One thing that a lot of our students find is that because hall becomes a place where you meet your friends on a regular basis, and you meet your daily basis, and also because you meet new people who are in your year group or in other year groups, a lot of students do come in to lunch and to dinner more or less every day, and that's a nice thing to have. It builds a nice sense of community among the college. So although it's not compulsory, you don't have to eat in college. I rarely did when I was an undergraduate at Trinity, I must say. I tended to avoid it, but that's because it was not very good for vegetarians then, and now it is. Now it's excellent for vegetarians. We've got an excellent vegetarian chef. So I missed out a bit on that when I was an undergraduate, but now it's excellent quality food for a variety of different diets, including diets from those who require special diets for either religious or health reasons. So I think that draws the students into college, into hall at least every day, once a day, for their meals.
The next question is, do you have free punting? We don't have free punting, but it's very heavily subsidised. I think it's about £5, whereas if you go somewhere else, it's like £20. So it's very cheap. And how many societies are there? What's the music and drama like? We have quite a few student societies in Trinity, and of course you have every society you could ever think of in the wider university. But yeah, we have quite a few societies which are really nice that you can do within college. And in terms of music and drama, so drama tends to be kind of like more outside of the college, kind of with the university drama society, but we do have a choir, and we have music practice rooms, so you can do music sort of within college as well.
Just on societies, one thing could I add? I mean, a lot of students start their own societies when they're here, and that's very much encouraged. You get, if you put a proposal together, you'll get a grant to help establish your society from the college. So Trinity tends to have quite a good number of organisers here. I mean, not everybody is an organiser, but we've got a good number of students here who like organising things, and you know, setting up a new music society or a new drama society or a new politics society or a new sports society is very much the sort of thing we see a lot of in Trinity, and it's based upon the motivations of the students. I mean, it's what they want to be doing. They need to get themselves and 2 friends or 2 other students to put their names to the establishment of a new society, and there you go, you're off and running. So it's nice to have students who are interested in, you know, who if they don't find that their interests are fully represented in the college, or they can see how they could develop their interests more, then it's very much up to you with our support help establish a new society that you think has got the potential to help you have those interests represented in college.
And the anonymous person who asked this question, there is a Taylor Swift Society. So if that's your thing, you can join the Taylor Swift Society. I think the last sort of like more general one I'll answer is King's has a reputation of being very progressive and liberal. How progressive is Trinity, e.g. in LGBT support, BLM, and so on. So we have what's called a TCSU, which is the Trinity College Student Union. And on that we have an LGBT officer, and we also have a BME officer. So that's like a dedicated person you can go to at any point if you want some solidarity or you want support from someone who identifies in the same way as you. And Trinity is just a very open place. We host a BME formal dinner, or we did in pre-COVID times, and that was we created sort of like a space for BME students from across the university to come and really celebrate, you know, being at Cambridge. So that was really, really nice. And yeah, I don't think I would like give it a sort of political leaning label, because it's just got such a big mix of students, but everyone's really open and progressive and friendly. And I find that Trinity is a really good place to really like celebrate who you are. So for Black History Month, we have a portrait exhibition of all of our Black students. We do Pride Month things. So Trinity is a very place where you come, and no matter what identity you are, you'll find people who want to celebrate it with you. So.
Out of interest, we do have, in most years, the largest proportion of UK students from ethnic minorities out of any Cambridge college. There's a variety of reasons for that, I think, but it is interesting to see that we're consistently either the highest or the second highest proportion of students from UK students from ethnic minorities. Okay, so any other questions on college that you think we should be answering, Lizzie? Is it possible to entirely self-cater? Yes, it is. Yes. I mean, so you get the choice of rooms when you start here, and some of the rooms have very good kitchens, others don't. And so if you were to start here, then it's important to make your desire for a kitchen known on your accommodation form. But that's possible. It's not guaranteed, I'm afraid. We can't say for definite that you'll be able to get a room with a good kitchen. Yeah, I mean, but it's the sort of thing that we do try very much to help students get the sorts of rooms that they want in college.
Someone says, are the dorms quiet? So yeah, the rooms tend to be pretty quiet, and there's always the library if you want total silence. But yeah, it tends to be pretty quiet around when people are studying. And someone says, I heard the Trinity porters are scary. No, they're not scary. The
Trinity porters are lovely. I mean, I really like our porters. Yeah.
The porters are very much kind of like, I would always describe them as like dads of the college. So they're there 24 hours a day. They're there if you get locked out of your room or if you need a plaster or something like that. And they're really there to keep you safe. So, you know, any instances that you've heard of people not being allowed into college is usually for a safety reason. So they're not scary, and they wear very nice bowler hats, which makes me feel very fancy as I walk around. So.
You get to know them well. So I find the students get to know the porters quite well in their time here at college. So obviously they're wearing what looks like a uniform, and when you first see them, you might think they look like security guards, but they're not. They're not security guards. They're there to help, and you will get to be very familiar with them in your time as a student. So
yeah, and you can bring friends to Trinity, and friends can come around to visit, and you can go to other colleges. So yeah, we've had a few about living costs. So are the living costs in Cambridge expensive? No, they're not. It's actually worked out for me a lot cheaper for me to come to Cambridge than go to any of the other universities I chose, and that was because it's small, so there's no transport costs. The accommodation is really heavily subsidised by the colleges, and so is the food and things like that, and just the amount of financial support available made it really inexpensive. And you also have a personal tutor who you can go to if you're having any financial issues, and they will work with you to find a solution. So you'll never really struggle with money and have no one to turn to. There's always going to be people to help you out. And it is true that you aren't recommended or allowed to have a part-time job when you're in Cambridge. That's just because the terms are really short and you'd be too tired. But we have really long vacations, so you can get a holiday job in a shop or in a restaurant or something like that. But again, there's enough financial support available that you don't need to work if you feel like you can't afford things. You should go to your tutor and talk to them about it.
Yeah. Just a couple of very specific questions. Are tutors friendly? Yes, that's why they're tutors. They become tutors because they like students and they like talking to students. And so yes, they're there to help, and they volunteered to take on the position of being a tutor in addition to their academic careers, for the reason that they like helping students. So friendly is part of the job description in that respect for them. Do you have a free gym? Yes, there's a college gym. There's a really good college sports facilities. I mean, personally, I tend to use the college cricket field most, but there are also tennis courts, squash courts, football, whatever. There's a gym there, which is underused, if anything. I think our students could make better use of the gym than they do at the moment, but it's good. I mean, it's lots of facilities, so you can use it any time, basically, because it's not fully booked out. You do need to sort of put in time slots if you want to use it, but the opportunity is there because it's underused largely.
So regarding accommodation, yes, so it's largely on site for the entirety of your degree. There are a couple of accommodation things that are a tiny walk away, but like minuscule. And yeah, so you can stay in vacations if there's a reason to. Most people tend to go home, but if there's a reason you need to stay, then you can stay. And we have a real range of accommodations. So you can have like a modern ensuite for the entire time, or you can have really old rooms with antique furniture. It's really up to you, but I think the accommodation here is nice and it is subsidized.
Just to stress, you get accommodation for your entire time as a student. I mean, I've often had this question that, do we get accommodation just for the first year, or you get accommodation for your entire time as a student if you would like it. And of course, as Lizzie said, it's cheap, it's highly subsidized, and it's nice. There's no, I mean, obviously for whatever reason you might want to live somewhere else in Cambridge, but the vast majority of our students live in college, and the opportunities there are available to everybody who's a Trinity student. Should we start talking applications, Lizzie, the second half of this? So we've talked about the college, we've talked about the social side of it. The other aspect of this is about applications. So I've already mentioned one point, which is about references. The first thing to get across for those interested in applying for this current round is that the interviews are all online. They're all being done via Zoom. I've just been compiling the guide for prospective students about the interviews, which you'll receive if you apply to us. And all of the interviews will be done via this medium that you're on at the moment. So the fact you're on it at the moment shows you know how to use it. That applies for every subject, and it also means that because it's remote, because it's not done in person, for subjects that in which you need to do some writing during the interview, say for example working through some equations, or working out a problem out in, say, engineering, computer science, maths, natural sciences, medicine, we are also asking you to get a graphics tablet. And that can be an iPad, it can be something that you write on with a stylus. If you don't have an iPad, then having a graphics tablet, and I've got mine here. This is what they look like. This is my graphics tablet, and there's a little stylus, and you write on it. And as a course, in the course of writing on it, stylus, writing on a graphics tablet, you will be able to see, your interviewer will be able to see in the Zoom whiteboard what it is you're writing. It's one of those slight complications in this year. And if you haven't used an iPad or a stylus-based tablet before, a drawing tablet, then it is important that you practice a little bit before your interview. It's not something that I think comes naturally, being able to write in one place and seeing the words come up in a different place. And so we've put up a bit of advice on the Trinity website on the 2021 interview page, which Stacey, I hope you can add. Sorry, Stacey is answering some of the questions in the chat box, but you could put up the link to the interview page on the Trinity website and put up some information there about the sorts of whiteboards. Sorry, the sorts of drawing tablets that you can use to draw on electronic whiteboards in the course of your interview. And so what happens is, for those subjects, especially those in the sciences, it's a bit more complicated than just just a conversation by Zoom, and you are expected to be able to find a way to use the technology. But we have got lots of guidance there available for you, which you can see in the link. That's just been put into the chat box for how to do that. It's not a huge hassle. I mean, it's the sort of thing that takes about an hour to get sorted out how to use your. So you can do it fluently, so that your writing on the whiteboard is as good as your writing if it were just by pen and paper. But it does take a little bit of practice to get there. So that's the only complication I think with this year. I think our survey of last year's students showed that very few of them found the inconvenience of doing it by Zoom rather than in person to be an impediment. I think there's generally a good sense that people could talk about the things that interested them and answer the questions just by Zoom in the same way that they would do if they were sitting in a room with us. And it does make it easier for travel. You don't have to spend hours traveling over to Cambridge in order to come to your interview. It'll be done wherever you like. You can be in your school, your home, wherever you're most comfortable when you do the interview. So that's the interview format for this coming round. Before you get there, though, there is the issue about who's selected for interview and who's not. Now, there's a few things here which I just want to flag up. One is that there are pre-interview tests, pre-interview assessments in a number of subjects. English, economics, computer science, most of the sciences have pre-interview assessments. And it's important you know if you do have a pre-interview assessment to take. If you're in computer science or in medicine, you need to register for your assessment by the 1st of October. So actually before you submit your application to us, possibly. The deadline for application, of course, is 15th of October. The deadline for actually sitting the test of mathematics for university admission for computer science, or the BMAT for medicine, that you have to register for that, because it's not just a Cambridge thing, it's done for many different universities. You have to register for that by the 1st of October. The others, you have to register by the 15th of October. So, so make sure that you know if you do need to register to sit a test. And if so, that will be an important part of our decision about whether or not to invite you to interview. And just be aware that you should look at previous exam papers, you should look at the specifications, and you should try out at least one prior test. I think the thing that catches most people out is that they're quite time pressured. You have to do quite a lot of work, answer quite a lot of questions. They're mostly multiple choice questions within a relatively short period. And just knowing how to pace yourself, knowing when you've spent a few minutes thinking about this question, you're not making much progress, do you carry on or do you just pass on to the next question? You need to have some sense of how quickly to do that. And if you're going to question spot at the start and just sort of see the questions which you can do and do those first, or whether you just go through them in order. Those are the sorts of things that just are going to come down to your own individual preferences. And I think it's just important that you have that sense before you start to, before you sit down on with the test itself to take it. The test itself is on the 3rd or 4th of November. So you've got a bit of time between now and then. It doesn't require you to do much preparation in terms of the subject outside of your A-levels or other program you're on. It's drawing from the syllabuses that are there for A-levels in terms of the subject matter. But it does require you to just have a sense of what the test is like and how to go about, for you, it's best to go about taking those tests. If you're in a subject that doesn't have a pre-interview admissions test, you'll often be asked to send in material to us in addition to the application. And so for many people, that will be an item from your schoolwork. And this is most common in arts and humanities subjects. In fact, it's only arts and humanities subjects where we ask you to do that. We ask you to send in a couple of things that you've done at school. So that could be an essay, that could be a piece of work that you've written for part of an EPQ, that sort of type of thing. And there's quite specific instructions with some subjects in that respect that you'll receive from us when you put your application in. That information is already on the website, so you can see it there. But it's important that you submit something that you're both happy with, that you think represents your ability, and also that you're prepared to talk about in the interview itself. So, so again, we will read that and we'll take it seriously. We're making a judgment about whether or not to invite you to interview. And then we'll think about whether to talk to you about it if you are invited to interview at the interview itself. So one nice thing about interviews is we're talking to you often about things that interest you, things that you've done and that you selected for us to read. And so one thing I like about the interviews is that we often are talking to students and pressing them, giving them ideas about things that are most interesting to them. And that brings out, I hope, the enthusiasm as well from you, that you can fluently talk about how you'd like to develop your understanding of particular topics and what your original ideas are and how those ideas respond to maybe suggestions from us about how those ideas could develop further in the interview setting. So so that's part of the procedure. We also, of course, look at your past marks, whatever your school sends us in terms of your school grades, as well as your GCSEs or other public examinations you've taken beforehand. We look at your personal statement. In most subjects, we're looking mostly in the personal statement for things you've done, not just things you've said you're interested in, but things you've actually done to show your interest in that subject. And that could just be, I read a book that wasn't on the school syllabus. I watched a video, or I listened to this series of podcasts, that sort of type of thing. It can be more than that, but we do want to get some sense, especially in arts and humanities subjects, of how your interests have developed in the subject for which you've applied for, to show us that this is something that isn't just a passing whim on your part. You're not applying for this subject not just because somebody said to you once, why don't you apply for the subject, but that because you developed your own interests, and your own interests are going to sustain you through your years of study here at Cambridge. So finding some way to explain that to us in your personal statements is important, especially in the arts and humanities subjects. I mean, all our subjects at Cambridge require you to do a lot of work yourself. You're not, some subjects, you're in classes and labs and whatever, but a lot of the work you do will be very much, we'll give you a project to do, we'll give you a topic to do, and we'll give you ideas about how to do it, but then it's up to you to do it. And so that's why motivation matters. That's why we're looking for students who we can be confident won't just sort of switch off from their subject when they leave the room, but will carry on thinking about it afterwards. Will carry on wanting to work on it, even when there's nobody sort of looking over their shoulder and making sure that they're doing what they're told to do. So being able to sort of convey to us that motivation is an important part of what a personal statement is there for.
We have quite a topical question. So this is from someone applying for law, but I think it could also apply to medicine. So how flexible will Trinity look at alternatives to relevant work experience where COVID has limited opportunities? Absolutely,
yeah. For neither of them are we looking for sort of high profile work that you've done. We're looking for, but for both of them, well, it's slightly different. For law, we're looking for people who've got some ability to understand what the contemporary legal system is like in whatever country you're in. So for us, it's also just, do you understand? You may not have studied it at school, you may not have studied it in any formal way, but do you have an understanding what the field of law is like? With medicine, I suppose in that respect it's similar. For medicine, we are training people with the intention that they go on to be professionals in the medical system, usually doctors. And to know what the National Health Service is like in the UK, the equivalent medical system in other countries, is, I think, an important part in you having confidence that this is a commitment you want to make. It's a 6-year program, essentially, to become a doctor. We want you to have confidence for yourself that this is something you understand what you're letting yourself in for, and that's just so. And so for us, it's not about you doing doing sort of research type jobs or demonstrating your intellectual brilliance in some complex setting. It's about us being confident that you know what you're letting yourself in for with this degree program. And so when we say work experience, we mean that deliberately broadly. I mean, it can be having volunteered at in patient care or something like that, or an ill people's home, it can just be something much more, having spoken to someone who's gone through their daily routine with them, who it can be just and we understand. Everybody's in the same situation over the past 18 months. We know that COVID has limited these opportunities, and that's the case for everybody. But we are still looking for you to show us some way that you've actually thought through what it means to work in a complex and demanding sector like contemporary healthcare, and that therefore you have the confidence you want to stick with it, even when you're doing sort of long evenings and struggling with systems that don't necessarily seem to be to you to be entirely rational. So I guess that's the best answer I can give to that question. Okay, so Lizzie, have you seen any others that are on this topic that we're about assessment? I suppose I'm thinking here.
I think you've pretty much covered a lot of them.
So we've got a few quite specific ones I could address, Lizzie, if you've got.
Yeah.
So personal statements. We've got a question asking about multiple themes in the personal statement, and so one thing that's just worth making clear is that you essentially get the opportunity to write 2 personal statements with your Cambridge application. You get to write the one in your UCAS application, which goes to all universities in the UK you're applying to, and you also get a chance to write anything, to add anything in the supplementary Cambridge questionnaire that you'll also submit. So you get the SAQ, the supplementary application questionnaire, in which there's a space there if you want to add anything. Now, don't feel you've got to add anything. Don't feel you've got to just repeat yourself. Of course, you've got your UCAS statement there as well. But there's often a chance to add things that are specific to your Cambridge degree that you're applying for, especially if the Cambridge degree is a bit distinctive, like it's not representing, it's a bit different from what you're applying to at other universities. So use the SAQ often if there's something specific to Cambridge that you want to express, and don't use it if you've got nothing really to add. Don't waffle just for the sake of it. So there's lots of places, there's 2 different places to write things. What we generally want with personal statements is a sense of your own direction, where you think you're going over the course of your degree program. We do get a few people who write these sorts of very general things that they're interested in a bit in this, and a bit in that, and a bit in this, and sort of trying to cover the entire sort of scope of the course. And that's not really giving us really very much to get a sense of what your particular interests are. We'd much rather you talk about what you're interested in, and that's that 1 or 2 things, that's fine. Also be aware that that's what we often will talk to you about at interview. So if you're called to interview, we'll have your personal statement, in front of us, and we'll be thinking about what should we talk to this person about, what could sustain a conversation for a good half hour. And if you say you're interested in this topic, then you can expect to be asked about it. And if you've got nothing really to say, that can often be not very a productive interview. So write about what you're interested in, what you'd like to talk about. It's your chance to set the agenda for at least part of the interview. So think about that as well when thinking about what to write in your personal statement as well.
A couple of questions about the pool and how it works post-interview.
Do you want to go for that one, Lizzie?
Yeah, so the pool is basically, and this also ties in with a few questions about, is Trinity more competitive? Is it harder to get into Trinity? And the answer to that is no, because of the pool. So the pool is kind of like the great equalizer of the system. So it essentially means if you apply to Trinity, we get a lot of applicants, as we sometimes do, and you get interviewed and they really like you and they think you would be great at Cambridge, but we just do not have the space for you. We don't have a bed for you to sleep in. They'll put you in what's called the pool, and that is essentially to ensure that no one can really game the system. So it means that people who apply to colleges that have fewer applications because they think, oh, I'll be able to get in with lower grades or something, that college won't take people with lower grades or people who don't meet the sort of minimum standards. What they'll do instead is they'll look in the pool to fill their spaces. So, maybe a college who hasn't filled all of its spaces for psychology, for example, will look in the pool and think, oh, Trinity's put in this really good candidate for psychology. They don't have space for them, but they're really well recommended. We'll take them and give them an offer. And all of this happens after your interview, so you don't really have anything to do with it. Sometimes you'll ask for an extra interview, but that tends to not really happen. But if it is, you'll be told about it. But essentially, it could be that you apply to Trinity or you apply to another college, and then on the sort of the day that everyone gets told if they've got in or not, you have an offer from a different college. And that simply just means that you were really good, they liked you, didn't have space, but they pulled you because they want you to go to Cambridge anyway. And yeah, it just keeps things quite fair, but just be aware that you could be pulled to another college.
Just because some of you like numbers, I'm sure. Usually, just to give you some numbers, usually we get about 1,300 applications, 1,300, 1,400 applications to Trinity. We make about 250 or 260 offers, and then we put in another couple of hundred students into the pool, of whom about 100, just over 100, often get taken by other colleges from the pool. So in total, about 360 or 370 of our students get offers out of that 1,300, 1,400 applicants. It's still, you know, a competitive process. It's still not everybody who's good gets an offer, but the chances of getting an offer if you apply to Trinity are usually no lower and are usually sometimes better by a marginal amount than applying to other colleges. So Trinity applicants tend to often get taken seriously by other colleges in the pool, and that therefore, at least, we do ensure this fair system whereby just because Trinity may be more popular in any one year, it doesn't mean that your chances of getting admitted to the Cambridge are any lower by putting in that application into what turns out to be a popular college. And so it's a quite nice system. It does mean that sometimes people get offers from colleges they've never been to or looked at the website of or even heard of before. But you get, as I said right at the start, I mean, it's the same course whichever college you're at. And so we hope that is a good outcome still for you.
So someone has said, some of my A-level subjects are not specific to my course, e.g. I want to do natural sciences, but I have English. Might the interviewers ask me about that?
So all your interviews are about the subject you've applied for. We don't do general interviews. We don't do interviews that are about other things other than the subject you're applying for. So if you're doing natural sciences, you'll have 2 interviews. We'll ask you, so one important part of natural sciences, we ask everybody who applies to us what their main subject interest is. Is it physics, biology, chemistry? And you choose one of those for your, and so you will have one interview in which one of the interviews will be in that subject, another interview will be in a different subject. And we also ask you not just what your main interest is, but what the other courses you're thinking of taking in your first year. And usually the second interview will be somebody from another course that you would take in your first year out of the list that you've chosen. So so it's important when you're making that choice when you apply. So this is a question, sorry, it goes out to you after you've applied. We ask you to fill in a short questionnaire on the website, and it's important that you make choices there that you know that represent your interests. So if you say that you're also interested in material science or whatever, then you're prepared to have an interview in which one of the interviewers is also a material scientist. Your second interview is done, the shorter interview is done by somebody who's in the broad subject area that you're interested in, so either physical or biological sciences. And that's a much more general interview in which you'll do a series of problems with that interviewer that are more general than just the individual subject for which you've looked at. We only do those sorts of academically focused interviews. We don't do any other type of interview. And we ask questions which we think are the sorts of questions that both sort of you should probably have the knowledge from your A-level to make some start with those questions, but will take you beyond just what you've done at school, deliberately giving you problems that you wouldn't necessarily be able to answer straight away, but with a bit of guidance and a bit of help from your interviewers, hopefully you'll make some progress to it. It is very much a sort of teaching conversation in interviews in all subjects. You know, we give you the sorts of issues that you'd want to talk through with us, and hopefully you'll come away from the interview having learned something that you didn't know before. So it is a sort of process whereby, like a supervision, where we talk you through a problem, you say what you think, you come to some sort of original understanding, we'll give you a bit more information, we'll see how you develop that. And over the course of the interview, hopefully both you and your interviewers will be further enlightened through that conversation. So, you know, for us, this is our first supervision with you. This is hopefully the first of many supervisions with you over the course of your time. But it's the one that we make the assessment through to see if you would be the sort of student who would benefit from being at a place like this, whereby you could respond to the level of teaching that we have, but also participate in those sorts of discussions that are educationally instructive. So that's kind of the idea of interviews.
And yeah, someone's asked if I'm calm and not nervous, will I make a better impression on the interviewers? They know that you're going to be nervous. They know it's a stressful time.
We're nervous as interviewers as well, for that matter. I should tell you that. So one thing I think that generally works quite nicely about interviews is that we get stuck into the subject quite quickly. So we'll give you a problem, and you might have a few minutes at the start where you're thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But by focusing in on the issue, whether it be an ethical problem or an intellectual puzzle or a mathematical thing or whatever, I mean, pretty quickly, the idea is that by focusing on this, you'll forget everything else. You'll be thinking about what's in front of you. You'll be thinking about the issue that is being presented to you. And through reasoning it through with us, through that conversation, I think generally people stop thinking about whether they're nervous and what this means and whether they're in an interview even, and they start focusing in on what the issue is in front of them. So hopefully that does actually work well in structuring your interview. But we understand that the first few minutes inevitably are a little bit you're wondering what's going on. You're wondering who are these people I'm speaking to, and that sort of type of first few minutes isn't really important. What matters is once we've actually started talking through an issue that we want you to discuss with you, you're able to focus, and so that's where it matters.
A couple of questions about EPQ and how good does it look on an application? Will you be asked about it in an interview?
Yeah, so EPQs are often very good, especially for arts and humanities subjects, and they often do become a significant basis around which we have a conversation with you. If you're in an arts and humanities subject which asks for you to send something to us, then the section from your EPQ is often a very good thing to submit. Partly because you'll know a lot about it and therefore have a lot to say about it in the interview from your perspective. But for us also, it's a more developed piece of work that we will find interesting, I hope, in reading. So EPQs are often good like that. It's not so much the mark you get. I know somebody asked about they'd already got a mark for the EPQ, and that's helpful information. But for us, actually, the most important part is actually just reading it through and thinking for ourselves. Yes, this is somebody who can do a more detailed piece of work. This is someone who can do something that's got some, which goes beyond just sort of the obvious points in writing. This is someone then in the interview who can explain their arguments in more depth. And that I think is more important than the actual sort of mark that you've got from the thing.
Do you have any advice on practicing thinking on the spot in interviews if your school doesn't offer practice interviews?
Yeah, so one thing I think you might just want to look at in the link that's just in the chat, we've got a couple of mock interviews that have been filmed with our current students. So they are real interviews in the sense that these are students who are not studying the subject for which they're being given the mock interview for, so they've got no prior knowledge, and they're being given questions that we have used before in an interview setting. So imagine yourself in that setting. So we've done one in law, one in engineering, to give you an idea of both an arts and humanities one and a sciences one. And you can imagine what it's like to be in that interview in the setting that's there. So that's a good basis if you don't have the opportunity for a mock interview with your school. Also, so one thing I find, especially for arts and humanities students, I just think it's good to get into the habit of discussing things in a serious way. So, imagine yourself summarizing a recent book or an article or a podcast or something that you've recently experienced. So imagine yourself explaining that to someone, what it means and what you got out of it. And that can be you explaining it to a parent or a friend or a sibling or a blank wall, but just sort of try out that process of explaining something and what you learned from it and why you think, and what it led you to in your thinking, and whether you had any criticisms of it, and whether, just get used to sort of explaining it. And it doesn't so much matter if it's in a mock interview or not. It's more that you're just used to doing that. You're used to sort of conveying your understanding and your evaluation of something that's intellectually focused. So yeah, mock interviews don't matter as much as just that more developed ability to go about explaining your own ideas to someone about something that's intellectually focused.
So how important are Olympiads and math camps and BMOs for maths applicants?
So it's all helpful information for us, but don't feel that you can't apply to us if you don't have these. We always interview lots of people who don't have competition experience as well as those who do. And it's part of our general sort of picture that we're building off you. And if you've done well in those, if you've done well in the BMO or whatever, then fine, please do tell us about it and we'll factor that into our general thinking. But if you haven't, I mean, we do interview the large majority of our maths applicants, especially those from, especially if you're doing further maths at school. If you are doing further maths A-level, then and your record is good so far, then you will have the opportunity to interview to show us your mathematical ability. I think in some ways things like the BMO matter most because the sorts of questions that get asked at that higher level are also the sorts of questions we ask at interviews. So it's more just that you're used to that sort of more complex question. But if you don't have that experience with things like the BMO, then to look at our sample papers on the website, we've got 3 sample papers in maths on the website of the sorts of interview questions we ask. And they're difficult questions. I mean, you won't be able to answer them straight away. You won't be able to answer some of them at all. But just have a look at some of those and see if you can sort of make progress with those, see how you get on. And then whether or not you've done BMO or whatnot doesn't matter so much because you've got the experience of actually having tried out these more difficult, more tricky questions of the sort that you'll get if you're invited to interview. So in that sense, it's about practice rather than about achievements.
Someone's asked, what do you look for in an applicant's personality? We don't look for anything in terms of your personality. We look for your academic ability, your potential, and that's it. You don't have to make anyone laugh, or it's not a personality test.
No.
Do most? Oh, yeah, you go.
No, go for it. Lizzie.
Do most successful applicants have 4 A levels?
No, we don't. Really see a good point in taking 4 A levels. It's much better to do well in 3 A levels than to take 4 A levels and do less well because you're spreading yourself too thinly. The only exception is further maths. So further maths is done on top of regular maths A level. So if you're doing maths, further maths, chemistry and physics, if you're applying for natural sciences, that's a good combination to have if you're thinking about physical natural sciences, biology, chemistry. Maths, further maths is good for you applying for the biological sciences, though further maths there isn't as essential. So further maths is a bit of an exception as a 4th A level. Aside from that, no, there's no good reason to take 4 rather than 3. And you do need to ask yourself whether you'll be spreading yourself too thinly, that you won't actually end up getting 2 A stars for a subject like economics or the sciences, or 1 A star AA if you're taking an arts and humanities subject. So just be careful not to overcommit. Lizzie, have you found any more questions, or we've got time for one more maybe?
I think we have time for one more, but it's hard to choose. Okay,
we've got the last one, which is a very good question. What do you do if you have a panic attack during an interview? And the main thing is just to be upfront with us, to explain to us what's going on, to tell us that you've got an attack of the nerves, to find some way to tell us that. And we will be sympathetic. So what we often do is we postpone your interview. We stop it then. We say, okay, have 5 minutes, have a break, come back to us in 5 minutes if you can. If not, then we'll reschedule the interview for a later time. Last year, especially our first year of doing these online only, we did have to reschedule a few people's interviews, largely because of technology reasons, but in a few cases also because of nerves. I mean, it does happen. Obviously, I very much hope it doesn't happen to you, but if that does happen, find some way to tell us. Don't try and just sort of struggle through, even though you're finding yourself going blank. Tell us what's happening, and we will be sympathetic, and we will find a way to reorganize the interview, either with us. Sometimes we do it with a different college. So there is a process also across the university for being re-interviewed by a different college. So, for example, that applies especially if you, you know, if there's anything that's happening that you're embarrassed about, for example, in an interview setting. So we sometimes get you different interviewers for that reason. So there is this is rare, but it's not completely out of it's not completely unknown. We do have internal procedures for dealing with people who are having panic attacks during interviews, and that's the basic sort of system we have.
Yeah, and it's definitely not something to feel embarrassed about. With a disability resource centre, so I get panic attacks sometimes, and the disability resource centre put in some accommodations for supervisions and things like that. So it's something that as a university we're equipped to deal with. So don't feel embarrassed, just tell us about it.
Can I just say, I mean, there's a few questions we haven't answered. I'm sorry about that. I'm just looking through the list now. There's a few we haven't, but we do need to end now, I'm afraid. Sorry. And what could I just encourage you to email us if you do have any individual questions which we haven't answered? Please feel free to email us on the admissions@trim.cam.ac.uk email address. Please do feel free to use that, and we'll get back to you when we can. So I hope it's been useful, and I hope some of you have been won over and you're thinking of applying here in before the 15th of October. Bye.
Hi everyone.